Look, I know it shouldn't be quite this easy, but we really like the Chevy Equinox EV better. I mean, I know the Nissan Leaf, it's the original affordable EV, and this year it's all new, it's still affordable, and it did really well on our Edmunds EV range test. But for similar money, you can get the entry-level electric SUV from Chevrolet, the Equinox EV. Now, listen, if you need to know right now which one we think is the more well-rounded, affordable EV, it's the Equinox. But there are some things that the Leaf does just a little bit better. Let me show you what we mean.
We're Edmunds, and we test hundreds of cars each year on the road and at our private track, so you get the most trusted reviews. If you want to know which car, truck, or SUV is the best, then stick with us.
The new Leaf is way better than the old ones, and in some ways it does succeed on its own merits, but in other ways, Now inside on this top trim, I get a really big screen matched with a reconfigurable gauge cluster of the same size, but even on lesser trims, the screen is almost just as big, and that's really nice. I do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but you guys, Google is built in on these upper trims, which I really like. So I already have Google Maps right there ready and waiting for me. The graphics here aren't fancy, but they are really easy to read. And I do want to point out the reverse camera with the 360-degree view. I mean, it's pretty clear, so I'm kind of digging that. I love the fact that I've got my little Bose speakers here in the headrest because I don't hear so good, and I like having that right up next to my head. And this roof, you guys, it's so cool, and it just gives the Leaf a little bit of an upscale touch. Now, when it comes to controls, a lot of stuff happens on the screen, but I do have this row of like haptic buttons down here for my HVAC. Again, I wish they were physical buttons, but you know what? Sometimes beggars can't be choosers, right? I do have a physical volume knob, so that's kind of nice. And the controls on the steering wheel, this is really, really useful, very functional. A little hard to figure out, but you'll get it after a couple of days. But there are two things in here that I just can't even handle. Number one, there's no dual zone climate control. I mean, come on, Nissan. Even on the highest trim, you're cheapening out. And second, there is no auto up window for the passenger. I mean, I'm usually the driver, but I know that passengers can find that really annoying. The Leaf doesn't have really big door pockets, but I do have two big cup holders in the front. It's not quite big enough to fit my big dumb cup, but if you've got one with a skinny bottom, that is gonna be no problem. The center armrest doesn't really have a lot of storage, but I love the fact that the wireless charging pad is right here because my phone just fits so good and it just, oh, I love it so much. These seats are Nissan Zero Gravity seats. I have always loved them, and I love them here. They're super comfortable even over our 5-hour EV range test. And the Leaf has got some of this like really cool interior trim here. It's got these blue highlights on it. I love the sentiment here. It feels a little bit like a wetsuit. I wish it was just a little bit softer, but if you're looking for a car that maybe isn't made out of a wetsuit, go to the link in the description. At Edmunds, we've got all kinds of tools that can help you find the right car at the best price. You guys, look at this cool design back here. I mean, listen, there is plenty of room in this rear seat. I'm 5'9", I have plenty of headroom, and I'm sitting behind myself with no problems whatsoever. In fact, the max legroom that you can get here is nearly 32 inches. You could easily fit 2 6-footers back here. 3 might be a little bit of a stretch, but 2 very, very easily. The seats, however, they're a little flat. I'm not sure how much time I want to spend back here. And keep in mind that in the base model, you get no amenities back here. There's not even air vents, but this top tier, I've got air vents, I've got heated rear seats, 2 USB-C ports, and a standard outlet. Nothing should ever lose battery back here. And if you need to put a car seat back here, look how easy these latches are to get to. Back here in the Leaf, I've only got 20 cubic feet of space, and part of that is because that is the battery there. But I do have this little cubby with 4 metal tie downs, and then I can put a little bag back here, move this little guy forward, and then boom, everything is hidden from view. I've also got some lighting, a 120 volt outlet, and when I fold these seats down, I've got 55 cubic feet of space, and that is enough to hold probably a couple of these. Now, I don't don't know how a vehicle can be both floaty and choppy and like shuddery all at the same time, but somehow the Nissan Leaf manages to do that. You're gonna feel every little imperfection in the pavement come up to the old butt dyno. But the good news is that the S Plus trim, that will get you about 303 miles of range. That's because it's got those tiny little wheels. This one, it's loaded, it's got more weight, and still we're getting 259 miles of range. But those are just the numbers that Nissan quotes. We've done our own testing, and I'm gonna show you later in the video what happened. Now, as for the powertrain, look, there's not enough juice here for you to go hooning around, not even in sport mode, but still, it's fine for daily driving. And what I really like is the visibility. There is so much visibility in here. It's super easy to park and to put exactly where you want it. Now, because this is an EV, you don't have any engine noise. That means it's really hard to make the rest of the vehicle quiet. And I gotta tell you, Nissan really fails when it comes to wind noise, especially around these mirrors. I mean, more than once, I've had to look around and be like, wait, do I have a window open? What's going on here? And as a fan of one pedal driving, I really don't like the fact that Nissan makes me initiate one pedal driving every single time I get into the vehicle. And it actually moves the brake pedal. I do not like that. Driver's aids here, I mean, like, you know, they're nothing special, but they all really do work well. And the lane centering keeps you nice and centered in the lane. The adaptive cruise control is nice and smooth. But what's great is that they are all standard across the entire trim package, even the vehicle that starts at less than $30,000. All right, so it's spacious, it's easy to drive, it's affordable, and you have a ton of range. Y'all, there is a lot to like about the Chevy Equinox EV, and there's a few things that maybe you're not gonna like so much. The worst thing is that, look, my lights are on the screen. Now look, inside the Chevy Equinox, I've got a really large screen here, and it is running GM's fairly new infotainment system. There are some things here. First of all, the good. I've got Google built in, so that means I've got access to Google Maps, Google Assistant, the Play Store. I've got 8 years of OnStar Basics. All of that is fantastic, but no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Now, yeah, I've got Google Maps already, but what I don't have is any way to read my text messages. You can set up your phone so that Google will read your text messages, but you guys, it's a very complicated process, and it's really, really easy to get it wrong. Oh, but check it out. A reconfigurable gauge cluster. Does that make up for it? Not quite, but it's cool. And this backup camera, like, look, there's all this unused real estate on the screen, plus it's not even that clear. Now, I really like that I've got some physical controls here for my HVAC system. There are redundant controls on the screen as well, but nothing beats a great physical button. And if you're wondering where your one pedal drive control is located, guess what? It's on the screen. Why? Just give me a button. There's actually some cool touches in here. I really like this kind of texture on the dashboard, and I love that our trim has got this blue contrast stitching. And check this out. In the RS trim, which is like the fancy go fast version of this vehicle, you can get red interior. A red interior on an Equinox. It so doesn't make sense, and I love it. Now, unfortunately, these seats are not quite as comfortable as what you get in the Nissan. They're a little flat. They're not as well bolstered. If I had my option, I'd rather spend my time in the Leaf. Now, as far as cup storage, look, no surprise. Big dumb cup does not fit. Skinny bottom cup fits like a dream. And there's all kinds of really cool little cubbies here, right? I've got this little guy here for like pens and pencils. I've got a cubby up here under my HVAC. And then this is actually a 2-story system, so I can put a lot of stuff down here as well. I think it's really, really good. Man, I thought that the Leaf felt like a wetsuit. Ugh. I mean, look, the good news is that we have a ton of room back here. On paper, there is 6 inches more rear legroom, and like, I believe it. I would shove somebody back here who's like 6'3" or 6'4", and I don't think they would have a problem. Look, the Leaf gets it done with seating, but you're gonna be much more comfortable back here in the Equinox, at least when it comes to headroom, because the seat of this, it's kind of flat, and there's not a lot of support. Now, as for amenities, I've got air vents, that's cool. I've got 2 USB-C ports, that's cool, but this trim doesn't have any heated seats. But if you've got little ones, you need a car seat like the Leaf, super easy to find those latches. Back here in the Equinox, you do have a little bit more room than what you've got in the Leaf, about 26.5 cubic feet of space, and that expands to about 57 when you fold those rear seats down, and they fold pretty flat. Now keep in mind this is an SUV, so this floor is a little bit higher than what you'll have in the Leaf, but you also get a little bit of extra added storage underneath here. There's also a few little amenities. You've got some lights, you also have a 12-volt and some metal tie-down hooks. Y'all, this vehicle is so much more comfortable than the Leaf. The Equinox actually has a compliant ride quality. It just soaks up the bumps and everything feels really, really smooth. And the road noise is better too. I mean, listen, when you get down below like 18 miles per hour and that passenger warning sound comes on, like, yeah, that gets a little loud, but road and wind noise are virtually non-existent here. My range is pretty good too, 319 miles for the front wheel drive version, 285 for the all wheel drive. Now those are EPA numbers, and we did just a little bit better when we took it for a test drive. And for the powertrain, look, you guys, this isn't a Lucid. It's not a Tesla Plaid. You're gonna have an adequate amount of power, just not overblown. The point here is that it's smooth and it's accessible. And remember that one pedal driving stuff on the Nissan? Well, here, this Chevy will remember your choice every time you turn the vehicle on and off. But even when you don't have one pedal driving on, I noticed that the brake, it feels like the grab point is really, really high. So I recommend you just put it on one pedal driving and let it do its own thing. And if you're a regular commuter, you can get the Equinox EV with Super Cruise. That's right, that is GM's eyes up, hands off driver's aid. Now, you're gonna spend a lot of money. In fact, you'll spend more to get that than you will to get a loaded Leaf, but still it's really nice that it's there. And even if you don't get it, you get all of the standard driver's aids, including the little GM safety seat that gives your butt a little buzz when you're doing something wrong. So what I've got here is a vehicle that has got better ride quality. It's not as noisy. It's got a good amount of range. I can get Super Cruise and I have the option of all-wheel drive. It's not looking good for the Leaf, y'all. Now, remember, at Edmunds, we can get you a good deal when you buy a car, but we can also get you a good offer when you want to sell your car. So check us out. Every EV gets a range estimate from the EPA, but like 0 to 60 times and cargo numbers that we get from manufacturers, you know we're gonna test it ourselves. And we have tested almost every EV on sale today. That is over 100 EVs, and we do it the same way. The same 60-40 mix of highway and city driving. We also use the same settings until we get down to 10 miles or less of range. And spoiler alert, these two are overachievers. The Chevy really impressed us. The Equinox EV managed 356 miles on our range test. And when it achieved that number almost a year ago, it was the most affordable EV we had ever tested that managed over 300 miles of range. But a new car holds that title. The Leaf covered 310 miles in our testing, and that number may not sound as impressive, but hear me out. Chevy sent us the most efficient version of the Equinox, but this Leaf is the loaded trim level with big wheels and more weight that can hurt your range. A little back of the napkin math tells us that if the most efficient Leaf S Plus overperforms the way this Platinum Plus did, it could achieve over 360 miles of range and at a lower price than the Equinox. Now, one thing to note is that both of these vehicles have the same peak charging rate, and they can charge at both a Tesla supercharger or a standard DC fast charger. But the Leaf doesn't even need an adapter. Hey, if you had a good time watching this video, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have any questions or maybe some suggestions on videos, go ahead and put it in the comments. We read them all. Now, value is a huge proposition for both of these vehicles. They are not cheap, no new car is, but they are some of the most accessible EVs that you can buy today, especially when it comes to this Leaf. I mean, the base model starts at right around $31,000. You don't even need that for an EV qualifier. Like, this vehicle is genuinely affordable. And Nissan said that it's coming out with a less expensive version next year. It'll have less power and less battery, but it'll cost you just a little bit less as well. Now, just over $40,000, our loaded Leaf here, it's got some really nice materials. There's a lot of attention to detail, and during our time with it, it seems to be very solidly built despite a few minor rattles. Now, our money is on the SV Plus. For an extra $4,000, you get all kinds of cool stuff. You get better upholstery, better stereo, better wheels. You get a bigger screen with Google. You get USB ports and air vents for the back seat. Plus, you get a heat pump, so it'll be really efficient in the winter. So all of that for 35 grand, I mean, that's less than the average transaction cost for a new car these days. So yeah, worth it. The Equinox starts at just a bit more than the Leaf, right around $35,000. So that means for the same price as a mid-tier Nissan, you're going to be getting a base Chevrolet with cloth seats and just basic features. But the real value addition here with the Equinox is the inclusion of 8 years of a subscription for Google. Now you only get 1 year in the Nissan, but also keep in mind, no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto here in this Chevrolet. So if you really want to use those Google functions, at least you're not going to have to pay in the Equinox. And the Equinox is a nicely built car. I mean, yes, on the low end, the materials can be a little hit or miss, but you could say the same thing of the Leaf. It's just that the low end of the Chevy is so much higher than what you've got on the Leaf. Really, it all comes down to if you value that higher seating position and the extra space. But you can spend a lot more on the Chevrolet. You want a loaded Equinox with all-wheel drive and Super Cruise? Yeah, it's gonna cost you well over $50,000. I mean, we think that the sweet move here is a base LT with a few comfort and safety packages, as long as you don't mind those cloth seats. The Nissan Leaf is a much better electric hatchback than it used to be, and it's a great way to get yourself into an entry-level EV. Of course, you get front-wheel drive only, and you have to be okay with less space, and if you really like Apple CarPlay, then yeah, it's a no-brainer, as long as you're okay with that subpar driving experience. But if we're recommending one vehicle today, it is the Chevrolet Equinox EV. It is more versatile, it's more spacious, has a better ride quality, and if you can keep those options in check, it still holds a lot of value. Yes, you're gonna spend a little bit more money, but we think it's worth it. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and we will see you next time.